Disclaimer: this story is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with a single sound. A soft clink, glass against glass, coming from the kitchen, echoing faintly into the quiet of our room. I remember lying there, half dreaming, eyes still heavy with sleep, skin barely warmed by the weight of the comforter. The silence was thick, but not empty. It carried something. Anticipation, maybe. Or the sense that something was shifting, quietly, between us. He didn't say a word. Not when he walked in. Not when he sat on the edge of the bed. Not when he brushed a cool strand of my hair behind my ear with fingers that were just a little too cold. And that's when I knew, he had ice. I opened my eyes, slowly. And there he was, my husband. The same man I'd laughed with earlier that morning while brushing crumbs off his shirt. The same man who forgot where he placed his wallet, but never forgot how to read my silences. And right now, his gaze wasn't playful. It was patient. Focused. Almost curious. Marriage is strange like that. One day it's errands and takeout and sleepy kisses that barely land. And then suddenly, without warning, it's something else. A new layer. A new language. A new edge to the same familiar love. His hand hovered near mine. No rush. Just that quiet invitation, unspoken, unforced. And the ice? It wasn't a joke. It wasn't for the weather. It was intentional. Measured. A test, maybe, or a memory in the making. But what surprised me wasn't the cold. It was how he looked at me, as if rediscovering something he thought was lost in the day-to-day noise. Something soft. Something waiting. My breath caught. Not because I was scared. But because I felt seen. Not as a wife, or a partner, or a to-do list. But as a woman. With wants. With hesitations. With a heart that still fluttered when the air shifted. And for a moment, I wondered, was this his way of asking me something? Or showing me something I'd forgotten about us? But just as I was about to speak, just as my lips parted with a thought I hadn't quite formed, he pressed one ice cube gently to the inside of my wrist. And everything stopped. The air. My thoughts. Time itself. Because sometimes the smallest gestures carry the deepest weight. And in that one moment, half warm, half chilled, I wasn't sure what hurt more, the cold of the ice or the sudden heat between us that neither of us had expected but both of us had missed. And just like that, I realized this night was going to change something. But I didn't know what yet. The ice lingered on my skin longer than it needed to. Not for drama. Not for reaction. But because he was watching me. Closely. As if the ice wasn't the experiment, I was. And I let him. Because it had been a while since we'd looked at each other like this. Not in passing. Not through routine. But with full presence. I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't startled, but because I wanted to understand what this meant for him. It was easy to assume this was just some playful spark, some spur-of-the-moment thrill. But there was something underneath it, something quieter. Something more personal. He placed the ice back into the bowl beside the bed, and I noticed his hands, shaking just a little. That surprised me. He was always so sure. So calm. The kind of man who remembered to set alarms, fold towels the same way every time, fix the dripping tap without anyone asking. He lived in logic. In lists. But not tonight. Tonight, his hands told a different story. Nervous. Tender. Searching. And it made me wonder, was this really about me? Or was he afraid of something too? I reached up, barely, and let my fingers brush his forearm. He didn't move away. But he didn't move closer either. We both sat in that fragile space between comfort and vulnerability. Between years of shared life, and the parts we still hadn't explored in each other. Marriage isn't just about what you give. Sometimes, it's about what you withhold. Out of habit. Or protection. Or fear that the person you love might not understand the deeper layers of who you've become. I whispered, finally. Why ice? He looked down at me, and there was a pause. A real one. The kind that fills the room, not empties it. Then he said, because it slows things down. And with those 4 words, I felt something catch in my chest. A truth I hadn't named. Because maybe we'd both been rushing. Through weeks, through expectations, through versions of ourselves we didn't recognize anymore. And now, here we were. Slowed. Still. Unspoken things floating between us like breath on glass. And just when I thought the moment would settle, he picked up another cube. This time, he didn't place it on my skin right away. He just held it there, in his palm, watching the way it melted against his warmth. His thumb traced along the melting edge, and I noticed how carefully he moved. As if this act wasn't about seduction. It was about presence. About patience. About asking for something without words. And suddenly, I felt myself slipping, not just into the moment, but into a memory. Last winter. The silence between us had been sharp then, too, but different. We weren't touching. We were avoiding. He had missed our anniversary dinner, stuck in a late client meeting, his phone left in the car. I had lit candles anyway. Set the table. Waited 2 hours. The food had gone cold. So had something else inside me. That night, when he finally walked in, all he said was, "I'm sorry." But there was so much I didn't say back. So much I swallowed and folded neatly under layers of grace, like the napkins on that untouched table. We never really talked about that night. We just moved forward. Like couples do. But now, watching him study that ice cube, I wondered, was this his way of bringing it up without bringing it up? Was this his quiet apology, spoken through attention instead of words? I sat up a little, pulling the blanket with me, suddenly more aware of the air between us. Not cold. Not warm. But charged. He finally looked up at me. And in his eyes, I didn't see lust. I saw regret. And longing. And a kind of tired love that still wanted to try. Sometimes, he said, voice soft, I think I forget how to reach you. I swallowed. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I did. You don't need to reach me, I said quietly. You just have to stay. He blinked. And I realized, that was the heart of it, wasn't it? The fear. Not that we didn't love each other. But that the everyday had made us stop showing it. He moved closer, the ice still glistening in his hand. But now, it wasn't about temperature. It was about trust. He placed it at the base of my collarbone this time, slowly, deliberately. And I felt something unravel in me. Not desire exactly. But a wall I didn't know I'd built. He whispered, "Does this feel okay?" And I nodded. Not because it was about pleasure. But because he asked. Because he cared enough to ask. In that moment, we weren't just 2 people on a bed. We were husband and wife again. Navigating years. Regrets. Love. And the hard work of choosing each other, again and again. But even as that warmth returned between us, something in me hesitated. Because love, once shaken, is never weightless again. And while his hands were gentle, his eyes held something unspoken. A truth he hadn't shared yet. A weight he hadn't named. And I wasn't sure if this night was about bringing us closer, or about softening the blow of something he was still afraid to say. The ice slid slowly from his fingers to my skin. Not rushed. Not accidental. It followed the curve just below my collarbone, leaving behind a trail of cold that burned in its own strange way. And yet, it wasn't the temperature that made me shiver. It was the silence between us, thick now, swollen with things unsaid. His eyes didn't leave mine, not even as the drop of water slid downward, soaking quietly into fabric and skin. That single droplet carried more weight than anything either of us had said in weeks. Or maybe months. He was trembling, though his touch remained gentle. And I knew, then, this wasn't just about closeness. This was about something unspoken, something he had been carrying alone. I looked at him fully, searching past the soft lamplight reflected in his irises. "What is it you're not saying?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He froze. For the first time tonight, he pulled his hand away. "I don't know if you still see me," he said. His voice broke, just slightly. "Not the way you used to." That hurt in a place I didn't know still ached. Because how could I explain the way I'd been surviving lately? The way I smiled through dinner conversations but sometimes didn't feel present in the room? The way I tucked myself into routine, like armor, so I wouldn't have to feel everything all at once? And how could he know that I did still see him? Maybe not through rose-tinted love. But through something deeper. Older. Worn in like sea-smoothed stone. "I see you," I said. "But sometimes, it's like you've gone somewhere without me." He didn't reply right away. He just exhaled, long and quiet, then leaned back slightly, as if afraid to get too close now. "I've been scared," he said finally. 3 words. Soft. True. Terrifying. I could feel the walls shifting between us. Not falling, not yet, but cracking. And in those fractures, old doubts returned, the missed anniversary. The months of small talk. The nights we both turned away too quickly, pretending sleep. "I thought maybe," he said, then paused. "Maybe the ice would wake something up in you. In us." And though I should have answered, I couldn't. Because he was right. It had woken something. Something I wasn't sure I could control anymore. The ice had long melted, the silence stretching between us like a thread pulled too tight, fraying at the edges. I watched him, still sitting near the edge of the bed, hands now resting in his lap, eyes focused on a point somewhere I couldn't see. He looked younger in that moment. Not by age, but by vulnerability. Unmasked. No titles. No roles. Just a man sitting next to the woman he wasn't sure how to reach anymore. And I felt it then, the twist inside me. A strange ache, not just from what was happening, but from what had almost happened months ago. There was something I hadn't told him. Not a betrayal. Not an affair. But a moment. A temptation. A pull. There was a man at work. Not someone I ever wanted. But someone who, for a fleeting second, saw me in the way I hadn't been seen at home. He noticed when I changed my hair. Asked how I was, and waited for the real answer. It was nothing. But it could have been something. And that possibility, that thought alone, had scared me into silence. And now, as I watched my husband, so open, so afraid, so present, I felt the weight of that silence begin to crack. I shifted under the sheets, sat up straighter. The vulnerability between us had already been stirred, but now it asked for more. "There's something I need to say," I whispered. He turned to me immediately. Not with suspicion. But with that same quiet bravery he'd carried all night. "I didn't cross any lines," I said. But I came close in my mind. And that was enough to wake me up. To remind me how far we drifted. His jaw tensed, but he didn't interrupt. I didn't feel seen. And it scared me how quickly I noticed someone else noticing me. The confession hung in the room like dust in a sunbeam, suspended. Weightless. But everywhere. He didn't look angry. He looked hurt. And somehow, relieved. I think I already knew, he said. I just didn't want to ask. I blinked. Why not? Because if I asked, it would mean I had to admit I hadn't been paying attention. That I left space for someone else to step in. His voice cracked. I'm not proud of it, I said. But I need you to know, it wasn't about him. It was about us. And then, after a long pause, he reached for my hand. Not like a husband reclaiming something. But like a man asking if he was still allowed to. I let him. Because even though the pain sat between us now, fully lit, undeniable, so did something else. The possibility of beginning again. But beginnings always cost something. And neither of us knew yet what we'd have to let go of to find our way back. His fingers tightened gently around mine. Not with possession. Not with blame. But with that quiet desperation that only comes when someone is still holding on, despite everything. We didn't speak for a long moment. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything we hadn't said finally had space to breathe. I leaned into the silence. Felt its weight. Let it settle between our bodies like a soft fog, honest, heavy, and strangely holy. Then he whispered, I think I've been afraid that if I really showed you who I am now, you wouldn't love me the same. I looked at him, stunned. Because it was the one thing I hadn't considered. I thought I was the one who changed, I said. That I became harder to love. His eyes met mine. You didn't. You just started protecting yourself. It landed like a stone in a still lake, deep, wide, echoing. Because he was right. Somewhere between his long days and my quiet loneliness, I had learned to build walls with soft smiles. To speak in politeness instead of truth. To survive a marriage that looked fine, but felt hollow some nights. And yet, here we were. Not perfect. But trying. I miss you, I said, voice trembling. Not the version you think I want. Just, you. The man who used to hum while brushing his teeth. The one who laughed with his whole chest. The one who'd dance with me in the kitchen even when there was no music. He looked away. Then smiled, tired, teary, true. I buried that man under work and expectations, he said. But maybe, he's still in here. Maybe you're the only one who can bring him back. And then, the twist I didn't see coming. He reached into the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote you something, he said. Weeks ago. But I didn't know how to give it to you. He handed it to me. And as I unfolded it, my heart caught. It was a handwritten note. Just 3 lines. I still dream of you, even with you lying beside me. I still want to learn you, again and again. I'm sorry for the silence, I just didn't know how to ask for your love again. Tears blurred the ink. And in that moment, the tension didn't vanish. But it softened. Melted, like the ice that started this night. And for the first time in a long time, we saw each other again. Clearly. And chose each other, anyway. The morning light was different. Not brighter, just softer. Like it understood that something quiet and sacred had unfolded between us in the dark. We hadn't said much after the note. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations. Just 2 people lying close enough to feel each other's breath. Hands still intertwined. Hearts still learning how to speak without fear. The bowl of ice had long melted, leaving behind a ring of water on the nightstand, a quiet reminder that even something cold and sharp could soften into something new. Just like us. And in that silence, something shifted. Not everything was fixed. Not everything would be. But the distance had thinned. The wall cracked. The air between us, breathable again. Over coffee, he told me about the pressure he'd been carrying. The clients, the deadlines, the creeping feeling that he wasn't enough, not at work, not at home. And I listened. Not to fix him, but to know him. Then I shared my fear of fading. Of becoming invisible beneath the laundry, the grocery lists, the conversations that never left the surface. He didn't interrupt. He just held my hand across the table and said, "I see you now. And I want to keep seeing you." That was all I needed. Because love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay when the silence gets loud. About reaching across the space, even when it hurts. About small, brave acts, like holding ice against a wrist, just to remind someone that they're still worth waking up for. Later that day, he danced with me in the kitchen. No music. Just the sound of the kettle, and his heartbeat under my cheek. And I realized. The man I loved had never truly left. He was just waiting for me at the edge of my patience, hoping I'd find my way back. And I had. Because sometimes, the smallest things, like a single melting ice cube, can awaken everything we thought was lost.